Found just north of Scotland, you will find the Orkney Islands. Just northeast of that, you will then find the Shetland Islands, and then northwest of those, the Faroe Islands. But who owns these islands? What is life like there? And do they have any interesting geographical or historical points of interest? Let's find out. So found just 16 kilometers off the coast of the very tip of Scotland, you will find the Orkney Islands, which belong to the UK. The total size of this archipelago is just shy of 1,000 kilometers squared, larger than the country of Sao Tome and Principe, but around half the size of Comoros. Around 22,000 people call these islands home. Of this 22 or so thousand people, around 17,000 live on the main island, which is quite funnily named mainland. This island also makes up around half of the archipelago's entire size. It is also where you'll find the largest town and capital, Kirkwall. English is the primary language spoken there, however the people here also speak a distinctive dialect of the Scots language. As the Orkney Islands are part of the UK, the British pound is used here. Now, being so northern, you'd think that the islands were bitterly cold, especially in the winter. However, believe it or not, that is not the case. Due to the influence of the relatively warm waters of the Norwegian current plus the Gulf Stream, the average yearly temperature is 8 degrees Celsius. Now, this sounds pretty cold, but this is actually only 3 degrees cooler than, say, Paris, which is found much further south and gets extremely hot summers. In the very north of the island chain, you will find the island of Westray, where less than 600 people live. Now, unless you are an aviation expert, you'll probably know nothing about this island. However, this island actually holds a very interesting world record. The island is home to the world's shortest passenger flight service. The flight goes from Westray Airport, which is found here, across to Papa Westray Airport. The flight takes around 90 seconds, although the fastest recorded time was just 53. The islands have their own flag, which looks like this. It has a red background with blue and yellow lines, similar to that of the flags of the Nordic countries. The geography of the archipelago is exactly as you'd imagine of an island chain off the coast of Scotland, raw, rugged and picturesque. The highest point found within these islands is Ward Hill, which stands at 481 meters tall, which for reference is higher than the peak of the Rock of Gibraltar, a fellow UK territory. The people of the islands live a relatively high quality of life and are rather wealthy. The islands offer rich natural resources, but it does see some issues regarding its unique location and transport connections. So travelling some 80 kilometres northeast from the Orkney Islands, you have now arrived in the Shetland Islands, another archipelago belonging to the UK. The Shetland Islands are around 50% larger than the Orkney Islands. You'll also find a lot more islands here, as there are around 100 in total. The population, however, is pretty much exactly the same as what can be found in the Orkneys, albeit slightly higher. Now, the islands are found in a very interesting part of the world, sandwiched in between Scotland, Norway and the Faroe Islands, separating the Atlantic Ocean to the west and the North Sea to the east. Just like the Orkneys, the Shetland Islands are raw and rugged. One thing that both of these island chains have is incredible beaches, something you probably wouldn't picture when you think of these islands. The waters can be crystal clear and the sand as white as you'd find anywhere else on the planet. Just like the Orkneys, the largest island in Shetland is mainland, which is just under 1,000 kilometers squared. It is where the vast majority of the population lives. The largest settlement and capital is Lerwick. You can fly here from Glasgow in around 90 minutes or 3.5 hours from London. The flag of the Shetlands is rather similar to that of Scotland, in the fact that it's blue and white. However, unlike Scotland's crossed line design, the Shetlands follows the more Nordic design. The island's main sources of income are agriculture, fishing and renewable energy. The islands are also home to a spaceport where multiple companies are planning to launch rockets from. The Lonely Planet once described the Shetland Islands as being the 6th best place on Earth for tourists seeking unspoilt destinations, which is rather ironic as this would then lead to tourists flocking there to see it. Around 45% of the people here are non-religious. The largest religious following is actually the Church of Scotland. Speaking of churches, you will find Britain's most northerly church within this archipelago. So overall, these two island chains are rather similar. Let's now move on to the Faroe Islands, which are a little different. So the Faroe Islands are found some 320 kilometers northwest of the UK, somewhat in between Scotland and Iceland. Now, unlike our previous two island chains, the Faroes do not belong to the UK. They are in fact of Danish territory. At just under 1,400 kilometers squared, the islands are about the same size as the Shetland Islands. However, their population is much greater, at around 55,000. It is more than both previous island chains mentioned combined. In total, there are just 18 islands across this archipelago, the largest of which is Streymoy Island, which makes up around a quarter of the archipelago's entire size, as well as about 50% of its entire population. Here on this island, you'll also find the capital, Tórshavn. The Faroe Islands are undeniably one of the most incredible looking islands on Earth. If you thought the Orkney and Shetland Islands looked amazing, then just take a look at this. The archipelago has a very Icelandic looking aesthetic to it, just without the glaciers and definitely more green. This is the highest point found within the island chain. Its name translates to flat summit. It stands some 880 meters high. That's a little bit taller than the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. Although part of the Kingdom of Denmark, the Faroe Islands have their own unique identity. They use the Faroese language, which is a Germanic language which is descended from Old Norse. The islands use both the Danish krone as well as their own currency, the Faroese krona. They are both of equal value. Their flag, as you'd imagine, looks like this, again fitting in with the Nordic looking theme. It has a white background with white and blue lines. Now, the GDP of the Faroe Islands is around $3.2 billion US, which for reference is a higher GDP than the Central African Republic, whose population is some 100 times greater. This gives the Faroese people a GDP per capita of around $59,000 US, which would rank them within the top 15 highest on Earth. The region also has a Human Development Index of 0.95. If they were their own independent country, this would rank them as around the 7th highest on Earth. So the quality of life here could be considered very high. The climate in the Faroe Islands is strongly affected by the warm Gulf Stream. It has what is known as an extremely maritime climate, where the differences between summer and winter are relatively small. It sees temperature highs of just 13 degrees in the summer and only as low as 2 in the winter, so relatively mild considering its very northern and isolated location. I honestly think that most people would assume that these islands will be mind-numbingly cold. They are wet and windy, however, which makes it feel colder. So there we have it, the Orkney, Shetland and Faroe Islands. Out of the three, which one would you rather live on? Like and subscribe for more geography content, and as always, thank you very much for watching.